The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Nicole Clark. Nicole is the co-founder and CEO at Trellis Research. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, JP.
So Nicole, let's start with yourself and a bit of a background. I usually ask your journey in technology, but your journey is slightly different. So can you give us a brief background of yourself just to set the stage for talking about Trellis?
Absolutely. So I was a litigator for a number of years, practiced mainly in employment, a lot of class action, wage and hour work in state trial court constantly, which led to my own frustration in trying to access data, which is really how Trellis developed.
Thank you for that. And it sets the platform nicely to explain Trellis as a business and where your background meets technology and AI. So tell us all about Trellis. What was the idea? When did you first come up with the idea? And what have been the steps to launch the company?
Sure. So from a high level, Trellis is really a state trial court data and analytics platform. What most people don't know is that our state trial court system, absent Trellis, is fragmented across thousands of individual county courts without any integration, without any structure. And so from a super high level, I like to think of Trellis as sort of a Google for the entire US state trial court system. And the way that we got there, I mentioned I was a litigator, and I often appeared in state trial court, which is where all of your employment claims are litigated. And I simply couldn't believe how difficult it was to access data at the state trial court system, which is the largest court system in the world. And basic information, let's look up my judge, let's see how they've thought about things before, let's look up opposing counsel's other cases. None of that was possible. And so I complained a lot with developer friends of mine, and we started aggregating data. And really the origin story was that I was writing a massive motion one evening. I was complaining to one of my colleagues that I just didn't know enough about the judge, and it was a complicated, complex issue, and I really wasn't sure how to present it. And my colleague said he had appeared before my judge in the past. And we went and we checked the internal file, and there was a PDF document that was a ruling by my trial court judge on my issue. And it was like getting handed the answers. I mean, I could see the way the judge thought about the issue, and I could see the case law the judge cited to. And so I really used that as an outline, won my motion, and stepped away saying, how was it possible that I didn't have this data to work with before? Historically, lawyers have been using Court of Appeals data as their only research, when the truth is, every case starts in trial court. Most cases don't make it to trial, let alone trial, then appeal to the tiny corpus of data that historically has been used for research. So what we started doing was collecting data really in the courts that I was appearing in most often as our MVP. And I used that data in practice for a number of years before finally jumping to launch Trellis and bring it to market. And the reason I finally felt confident to do so was because my practice changed so dramatically in being able to access this data, see information about my judge, about my opposing counsel, et cetera. I had a massive competitive advantage. And so I knew if it was going to be useful to me as a litigator, it would be useful to other litigators as well.
Amazing. I love the backstory, and it resonates with anyone who saw such an obvious problem, came up with a solution, and that's the foundation of a new business venture. So I'm excited to learn more about it. So given your background is on the litigation side, what were the early stages of figuring out just how you use AI insights and data capture analytics? Who else did you bring into the fold, and what has the early stages of launching the business from concept to now a fully formed platform been like?
Yeah, and it's very true. I didn't myself have the resources, the technical resources, and so I knew I needed to bring in experts. We're talking about a massive amount of data, hundreds and hundreds of millions of cases across counties and states all across the nation. So very early, I worked with a developer, and think of that as just a search engine that we built as our very initial iteration. And then from there, what we started doing was judge analytics. So very specific judges, how many cases do they have? How busy are they? What types of cases do they hear? And then all the way down to granular motion analysis. So how does the judge that you're assigned to rule on very specific motions and specific practice areas, et cetera? And so I brought on my technical co-founder, Alon Schwartz, who is a serial entrepreneur and technologist. And it's really the combination of the two of us, me with the sort of domain expertise to understand the market, and then him with the technical chops to be able to actually execute. But the difficult thing, I'd say, from a technology standpoint in what we're doing is, and I'll be honest, there's a few, it's a very fragmented data set, is just that we're talking about unstructured data across thousands of individual courts. So I'm in California. So if you think about Los Angeles, their court is separate from San Francisco, separate from San Diego. There is no structure to the way they define case types. There's no structure to the parties. So it's wildly disparate raw data. And the difficult part is really taking all of that data, structuring it so that we can actually then analyze it, make meaning, create the algorithms that are doing some of this predictive analysis. So the structuring of the data itself is step one to a really fragmented data set.
Yeah, I think anyone who spends any amount of time thinking about just how many various data sets and ingestion sources there would be in order
Yep.
to get the platform up and running could very quickly see just how big a challenge it is and why AI is such a critical tool to help you automate and do it at speed. Can you give us some insight into where the platform is in its current state, and when you're going out speaking to prospective customers, what functionality is now available to them who want to use the platform today, and then where do you see it evolving to over the next couple of years?
Absolutely. So we have come a long way from the initial permutation of a search engine. And we are now across 12 states, 365 counties. Remember, it's a county by county effort to aggregate this data. And some of the main use cases are going to be your sort of judge analytics from the start of the case, and then also really zooming out across our court system. If you want to see everywhere where Bank of America is getting sued on a particular fraud issue, where this outcome in front of this judge, we're now able to gain insights all across the nation on these litigation trends, all the way down to granular sort of litigators being able to use all of the filed documents across the nation as a brief bank of sorts. And what I mean by that is simply utilizing something that another attorney wrote that was successful as an outline for your motion, cutting down on hours and hours of what otherwise is rote legal research that really should be automated. And then it goes really across the board in terms of use cases. We recently released verdict analytics as well, which maps all of your underlying cases since 2009 that have gone to verdict, what the sort of metadata around that was, who were the experts that testified, and then analytics on really ability to slice and dice this data. If you're looking at a leg injury in Texas, where this particular plaintiff's firm, what's the average median for those types of verdicts? So if you almost think about almost hundreds of different sort of metadata data points, and then the ability to slice and dice the data across the board through opposing counsel, lawyers, law firms, verdicts, motions, outcomes, case types, almost any permutation that you can imagine, we're able to really help provide insights on. And another interesting thing that we're seeing is that it's not just private sector legal that this data is valuable for. So there's a whole variety of industries that historically haven't used this data because it hasn't been accessible. It just wasn't a data set that they could tap yet. And so we're seeing huge pull from insurance companies, which are entirely state court regulated, financial services. An interesting one is even property management. All of your landlord tenant eviction records are in state trial courts. So all of these pieces you may not think about that really lay underneath the surface in state trial courts, we're bringing to the surface to help lawyers and then as well as other industries just make better decisions generally.
I'm always cautious to use the phrase game changing, but based on what you've explained, this genuinely could change the entire industry, not just from a litigation perspective, but how people view laws and how insurance policies and everything else that comes with the knock on effect of these decisions. Because what you've essentially done is put the spotlight on all historical data and structured in a way that people can get insights from it, because unstructured data is effectively useless unless you put it through a system that's easy to process. And it sounds like that's what you guys have done. So it's incredible.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions. www.alldus.com.
I want to spend a bit more time now on the behind the scenes, particularly on the AI side. Obviously, you're as the founder, you oversee all aspects of the business. But can you give us some insight into what the current makeup of the technology team is across the board of analytics, data science, data engineering, and what the typical project cycle looks like for the team?
So that's definitely depends on exactly what we're doing. We have an incredible engineering team. What I will say is for folks that are interested in joining a team, we are absolutely hiring right now across data science, data engineers, back-end engineers as well. We're growing our team really massively right now. And it is, to find engineers that really want to focus on, as you said, game-changing issues, problem solving. We're talking about the entire US court system, which has really not been accessible or transparent up until now. So in general, we work on weekly sprints. We are a startup, so priorities change. We have sort of high-level priorities that we work towards, and then we have what are we getting done this sprint in particular. Some of the projects that we're working on right now include a lawyer and law firm analytics. So in the same way that we do judge analytics, being able to almost think of it as help consumers have some transparency on lawyers, law firms, litigators to say, what cases are they actually hearing? What venues are they appearing before? What does their track record actually look like? So again, it's taking what is historically unstructured data and surfacing what you need to be able to deduce meaning and actually make better decisions as consumers, as businesses that are choosing litigators, et cetera. So that's one project that we're working on. We've got a whole variety of mixing and matching various analytics. We've got company analytics that we're working on right now as well. So think of your top sort of Fortune 100 companies. Where are they getting sued? By whom? What venues? What lawyers represent them? Again, all of this data, which is there, but because it's never been structured, hasn't been able to be surfaced before. And I actually think that law is this really interesting use case for AI, where it's almost the perfect scenario. You've got hundreds of millions of records that a human couldn't possibly go through. What we did really early was huge classification effort because there was no training set for this data. It had never been structured before, and we didn't have anything to train on. So we had to really go through with a huge manual effort in the beginning to create the classifications, the structure, so that we can continue now to actually iterate and optimize algorithms to be able to do what humans just certainly couldn't.
You've come a long way with this, Nicole, and it sounds like it's been very well received based on the number of states that you guys have now signed up to ingest data. When you look ahead, obviously you're just getting started, and it sounds like this is a platform that could be used by every law firm across the country, regardless of the type of law being practiced. When you look ahead, what are you most excited about for the future of Trellis Law? And when you think about potential impact, how big can this get, and where do you see it going over the next few years?
So I like to think of Trellis as really, when you think about the varying court systems, you have the trial courts, Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court. And Court of Appeals and Supreme Court, there's been a fair amount of structure. It's a tiny data set. There's insight there. Again, where there isn't insight is this lower court system where every case starts in the trial court system. And so I like to think of Trellis as really owning that entire court system, whether it be that someone needs particular records, research, or data via API to help funnel into a whole variety of platforms that help other industries make decisions, which is really what we're moving towards as well. Because at our core, we are a data company. So I like to think of Trellis as the really owner of that court system. And then as we move forward, there's no reason that we couldn't apply the federal court data, the Court of Appeals data to the same structured format that we have. Again, powering analytics, it's really simply shining a light on, allowing transparency into our judicial system in a way that hasn't been done before, but that isn't acceptable. Data's come a long way, technology's come a long way, and it's not acceptable that there's a black box around our judicial system. We need to be able to have insights. And so I see Trellis as really providing that legal intelligence into the entire judicial system for the US.
Excellent, excellent. Final question from me then, Nicole. When you're speaking to prospective candidates about what you're doing at Trellis and the opportunity available to impact the industry, what is it that you tell them that gets them interested in joining Trellis over some of the other organizations available?
So really at the core, we are a team of people that are super excited to get up every day and to make a big difference in one of the industries that's the last greenfield data space that's out there, with a team that directly impacts the business, and we can all see the impact that we're having on the business. And so it's just a really exciting way that we get to get up every day and face this really difficult problem together.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. You've built something truly innovative, and it's remarkable the impact that it's having. And we look forward to seeing Trellis continue to grow and in the very near future be used by law firms across the country. So thank you very much for your time, and best of luck in the years ahead.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.